Good afternoon, everyone. It is Saturday, October the 31st, 2020. It is currently 12 p.m. Central Time, and I'm here at Victory Baptist Church. And I don't know if I should have hit the big red go live button or not, because I don't really know. I've got all of these thoughts, and I don't have them organized. I don't have them prepared. I don't know if I'm going to say anything valuable. This may be a situation where I'm just thinking out loud and you're going to get to listen in, and it may not be anything that you care to even listen to after a few minutes, but I'm trying to process some thoughts, and let me try to explain what's going on. I spent over an hour just in the last live broadcast telling you about these storms that I think are coming. We got the COVID situation. We got the election that could turn into utter, complete chaos. And people are worried about a civil war, and that Americans are going to kill Americans, and all the things that are with that. How that's leading to a divided church, and Christians are being divided and fighting one another. And we've got the Equality Act that if Joe Biden is elected, will try to pass within the first 100 days. There's a lot of issues that we talked about in that episode. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that episode was because there's this thought that's been running through my mind now for a couple of days, for a couple of weeks. And it goes something like this. As Christians, we are living in some very difficult times, and the situations don't appear to be getting any better. So how should we respond to these things? Now, listen, we can take each individual situation, say COVID, say the election, whatever, and we can talk about very specific things that we should do or not do in response to these situations, right? Here's the biblical way. But what I'm referring to is this. All of these situations are providing, I think we could refer to them as trials, as difficulties. And all of our lives, forget the major things that are impacting us at large. Just in your life and my life, on a daily basis, we have difficulties. We have trials. We have circumstances that can lead to frustration, bitterness, anger, depression, despondency, you name it. And we always have to think, how do we respond to these difficulties of life in a biblical way, right? And I really want us thinking about that. And there were some scriptures. I did kind of some Bible study exercises trying to get people to really think about this. I thought it was going to spark more of a conversation. It really didn't spark a conversation, which is always frustrating to me, because I really believe that this is something we need to think about. We know that difficulty is on its way. We know that your life and my life, there's going to be unforeseen circumstances and difficulties that's coming. We need to prepare ourselves biblically, and I think we have to figure out how should we think in regards to trials. And there were some scriptures that I gave everyone to consider and to think about. The first one was, I'm not going these in the order that I gave you, but some of the ones that I wanted everyone to think about was in, first one was 2 Corinthians. When I say the first one that I remember, I don't remember which order I gave them to you over the few days that I did these devotional messages. But 2 Corinthians 4 was one of the ones that I definitely wanted you to consider. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, all right? Now, the Apostle Paul is writing to the church of Corinth. The Apostle Paul has suffered a lot of very difficult situations. He outlines many of those difficulties, I believe, in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. He talks about all the different things he's faced, but look what he says here. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 16. For which cause we faint not, but though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day. All right, so we spent a lot of time talking about this one. Hey, all of the difficulties in life, all the things that can come upon you that in a sense begins to destroy or weakening, or the outward man is perishing, that begins to hurt, destroy the outward man. One of the ways that we are to able stand and continue and to press forward is because the inward man is renewed day by day. And this is very important, that your spiritual health, your spiritual well-being is absolutely essential if you're going to withstand all of the things that come upon you mentally, emotionally, physically, financially. It's the inward man that must be renewed day by day. And so I talked about the importance of the renewal of the inward man. We must focus on that. If right now with all the storms that are coming, if the inward man is not being renewed day by day spiritually, you're in trouble. Your spiritual health is the most important thing right now. Your spiritual well-being, you have to look at yourself. How are you doing spiritually? All right. I don't want to repreach this, but this is an important point. So and we talked about that. Next, verse 17, 2 Corinthians 4:17. For our light affliction. Now, that Paul refers to it as a light affliction is kind of mind-boggling, because if you look at the things he endured, no one would refer to that as light affliction. But because he's looking at it from a spiritual perspective, he sees it as light affliction. Why does he see it as light affliction? Well, he understands light affliction because it's only temporary. Because he says, for our light affliction, which is but for a moment. When we see things from a spiritual perspective, we realize that whatever we endure negatively in this life, it's but for a moment. We're looking for eternity. We're not looking for the temporary. We're looking for the forever, not for the now. Right? And so when we look at trials from a biblical perspective, we see them that they are a light affliction because they're only temporary. And then ultimately we're going to be in a place where there's no more pain, no more suffering, and no more death. That changes our view of affliction, of trial, of pain. It's only for a moment. It's only for a moment. All right. And again, I could talk about all of this over and over and over again. But it worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. Another reason he sees this as a light affliction is because he sees that it's doing something. It's working something in us for a greater glory. It's working something in us for a greater glory. And so we see that trials actually are supposed to be doing and benefiting us spiritually. Now that concept is great, but it got me thinking. Okay, if trials are to benefit me spiritually, does it just do that naturally? Like, here I am, I'm a Christian. Trials happen, boom, I'm better off spiritually. Or do trials hit me, and the benefits that will be produced from it is based off my response to them? How there's certain things I have to do if I truly want the trial and the difficulty and the light affliction to produce a greater sense of glory, What do I have to do? And that's what I've been trying to ask myself. Like, so what's the way to respond? Like, I think we can think of it this way. Every trial is either a trial that will lead to greater glory and spiritual good, or that trial will become a temptation that will lead us into sin. Every trial is either a trial that leads to good or a temptation that leads to sin. And the difference is how we respond to it. So there is something that I have to do to make sure the trial leads to something good. Right now, we can look at everything happening in 2020, all the things that are coming to the Christianity, to the church, and we should be looking, what can we do to ensure that this makes us better and God is glorified in a greater way? But it seems that Christians are not thinking about that. We're worried about politics, or we're worried about this, or we're worried about that, and we're fighting this and we're fighting that, and we're not stopping to go, Lord, thank you for bringing this into our life. All right, if we're going to accept good from you, we accept the negative, the evil, the difficulty. Now allow us to respond to this in such a way that it produces a greater glory to you. But it seems like people want to make political points. They want to make some kind of a statement. The statement we should be is, Lord, how can this lead to greater glory for you? That's the point. That's the perspective we need to have. So I've been trying to say, what do we need to do? The same thought came to me when I looked at 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 7. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 7. 1 Peter 1, 7. 1 Peter 1:7, that the trial of your faith, there's the trial, being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, may be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. Now, 1 Peter 1:7 is kind of interpreted two ways. We kind of struggled through this. Does this simply mean that, hey, your faith is more precious than gold, and the trying of your faith basically reveals the genuineness of your faith? That's how some translations almost handle this. Trials reveal that your faith is genuine. It will demonstrate the genuineness of your faith. Or do trials, in a sense, purify your faith. It's a purifying way of looking at it. Some people interpret 1 Peter 1:7 kind of in different ways. Hey, your trial is going to reveal that your faith is genuine. Or the trial, yes, it will reveal your faith is genuine, but it also purifies. Like fire purifies gold. The fiery trial will purify your faith. It will make it better. Okay, well, if it make it better, then the question is, what do I have to do in order for it to do the purifying work? Is it a natural thing? I'm a Christian, trial comes, boom, my faith is purified. I don't think it works that way. I think it will either purify or it will burn up. In other words, it will either be a trial for good or a temptation for sin. I think a lot is determined on the way we think about it. So I'm really trying to process this and trying to figure this out. I looked up a number of things saying, how should we respond to trials? But a lot of it was so vague and general that I don't think it really gave me like, here's the right way to handle this. So I ended up at this passage of scripture today while I was sitting here. I ended up over in 2 Corinthians. Once again, Paul spent a lot of time suffering. 2 Corinthians chapter 11. All right. Actually, 2 Corinthians 11, he outlines all of his suffering. Which is not light affliction if you look at it from a human perspective. But then in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, he talks about some more suffering that he endures. Because in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, he starts talking about this thorn of the flesh. All right. Where do we read this? We'll go to 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7. And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there were given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. Now, this verse is powerful because Paul seems to understand why he's given the thorn of the flesh. He was given the thorn in the flesh so that he would not be exalted above measure, that he would not become prideful, boastful, arrogant. He was given this very painful thing, whatever the thorn in the flesh is. And in some ways, it's good that it did not tell us because that means it can be applicable to a lot of things. But 2 Corinthians 12:7. And so for this thing, he gets this thorn in the flesh. For 3 times, he asks the Lord that it might depart from him. That's 2 Corinthians 12:8. We know how God responds, or Jesus, actually, the words are in red. Christ responds this way, 2 Corinthians 12:9. Christ, God, one God, 3 distinct persons. Okay, won't get into a doctrine of the Trinity, but you get the idea. He said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, and this is what Paul says, I will rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. I will take pleasure in my infirmities, and reproaches, and necessities, and persecutions, and distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Now, it seems that what Paul realized, he realized really 2 things, right? He realized that, hey, this was given to me so I would not become prideful or arrogant. So we have to ask ourselves, what spiritual, like whenever a trial comes upon our lives, whether it's COVID, no matter what the situation is, the country being torn apart because of the election, Christians, all of the division and fighting within Christianity, whatever the issue is, the way COVID is impacting the church, all the problems, we have to stop and ask ourselves, okay, what is the spiritual benefit from this? Is it to humble us? What is it? What is it about it that we have to look for the spiritual benefit in it? Because if we don't have that spiritual mindset, we're just going to see it as a difficulty, right? Look, Christians are really bad at just throwing out cliches, right? Trial came into my life. Well, all things work together for good. God's got a purpose in this. And we just throw out a cliche. Okay, well, what does that mean? Paul identifies specifically that thorn of the flesh had a specific purpose, which was to keep him humble. If we can identify a true spiritual benefit coming from it, then I think we will have a tendency to respond and an advantageous way. That, in other words, will respond in a way that it will make it beneficial. But we've got to identify. We can't just be general that, hey, it's going to make it better. In what way? Paul knew in which way. He had received certain, basically revelations. He had seen things that other people had not seen, and he could become arrogant, and he felt that this was humbling him. But there's a very important concept that he gives us here. He says he will take pleasure in his infirmities and reproaches and necessities and persecutions and distresses. So he realizes he's going to take pleasure. All of these negative things that come upon him, all of these trials, he's going to take pleasure. And here's the reason why. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Paul began to understand the trial would keep him humble. There's a spiritual benefit, and he's going to rejoice in it because somehow trials, difficulties, pain, suffering weakens us. And when we become, listen, the weaker we become in our flesh, then we have to rely on the strength of, we talked about in 2 Corinthians 4, being renewed in the inward man. We have to rely on a spiritual strength, not a fleshly strength. And I think what's happening is many Christians are not allowing current trials to weaken us fleshly, but we're trying to fight in a fleshly manner. We're trying to fight politically. We're trying to fight in a fleshly way. And therefore, we're not going to gain spiritual strength. If the trial weakens me in a fleshly way, then I have to rely on prayer, fasting, scripture, God. I have to rely on the spiritual. That's what it should drive us to. But it almost seems like, you're going to tell me we can't, we're going to fight this. We're going to fight this. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. We're not going to, and it's almost like it's unleashed a rebellious spirit. It's released a fighting spirit. It's released an anger. It's released a bitterness. It's not broken us. It's almost caused us to stand back up to fight in a fleshly, physical manner. Where we are not, for some weird reason, everything happening to us right now, the church is not responding with, take up spiritual weapons. Let's fight this spiritually. But we've decided to take up fleshly weapons and try to fight back in a fleshly manner to accomplish fleshly success. Right? Like, okay, the people are dying all over the place with COVID. We got all the things going on with COVID. Okay, no, you know what? We're not going to follow any of the rules. We're not going to social distance. We're not going to wear masks. We're going to meet as a church. We're going to do what we want because we're going to prove a point. We're going to fight for our religious liberty. So you're basically taking up a fleshly approach to a spiritual war. Well, that's not you becoming weak so that he can become strong. That's you trying to be strong, almost weakening the spiritual aspect of it. I think that we have to allow the trial to weaken us fleshly so that we rely on the Spirit. I think this is a very important concept that we have to think long and hard about. I want the trials that we're going through. I guess this is what I'm really trying to figure out. I want all the difficulties that we're facing right now as people, as the world, as Christians, as the church, especially, obviously speaking to Christians in the church. I want all of this to produce something good. I want it to make us better spiritually. I want it to make each church stronger. I want it to make each Christian better spiritually. And I'm afraid that somehow we're not thinking about this correctly. I think something's gone, like the wires have become disconnected. It seems like we're not saying, Lord, you bring good into our life, but you also bring bad. You also bring negative. And we embrace what you bring into our life, the good and the bad. And we ask that this difficulty, this trial, this suffering, all of these reproaches and all the things that we're facing, Lord, show me how to use these things for my spiritual good and your greater glory. I think it just seems so weird right now. I know that many Christians, the way they're responding to COVID and many of the issues, they will say they're doing it for God's glory, but it seems more that it's about their glory, their purpose. It's about them making sure that they get plenty of money in the offering plate. It seems to be about that there's all these other false agendas that we are disguising as being godly, but it's not. I think this is something that we have to think long and hard about. Let me look something up really quick. Yeah, I'm getting all kinds of news notifications. Let me look here real quick. I don't know if there's any new information here. And it's not really the point I want to make, so if there's not, it's no big deal. Yeah, okay. I was looking for a news update on something, but there's no update, so I'm not gonna mention what it was. But I just want to make us think about this. I guess here's the thing I want you to realize: trials are coming. Trials are real. They're coming. You could talk about just everything happening in the world, happening in America, happening to the church. They're going to come in your life. Things I don't even understand. Things I don't even know what's going to happen to you. Difficulties. They're going to happen. They're going to happen to me. And I just think that so many times we throw at the trial a cliche. And then we act like, well, see, that made me better spiritually. But did it truly make you better spiritually? Well, all things work together for good. And you just quote some scripture. We got to really think about this. Each trial will either be a temptation to sin or a trial that will purify, that will lead you to bringing God more glory. And I think it has to do with the way we respond. And we have to respond with seeing these things in a correct way. Now, I know 2 Peter 1:7, or I know 1 Peter 1:7, depending on how you translate it and understand it, may be more about just revealing the genuineness of your faith. And I'm not denying that aspect. But a lot of times we also refer to this as there's a purifying aspect. And I want that purifying aspect to come. I stated this at the very beginning of the pandemic, that what I hope would come from this is the way Christians would respond to this, that we would come out more committed to God, more focused on Scripture, that we would come out of this better off. And if you go back and listen to those messages I tried to explain and speak at the very beginning of the pandemic, you can hear that was my heart. Hey, we can respond to this in a good way, that this will purify us, this will make us better. But I'm not seeing that. I think we become more political, more divided, more ideological, and more about making a point than we are about God being glorified. Now, we say we're doing it for God's glory. We say it, hey, we can't cancel services because, we're going to glorify God by making sure that we don't forsake the assembly, and so we find one scripture, all of a sudden it becomes the most important scripture, but we don't care about loving our neighbor, loving our enemy, caring about people, preserving life, all the other issues. And it's just think that it's all about taking sides now. It's all about taking sides. Every Christian has a side. I'm like, wait a minute. Instead of taking a side, these are fiery trials coming upon us. How are we responding to these in a way that will bring God greater glory and may benefit us spiritually so that we come out of this trial, COVID, whatever the case may be, better off? The church is better off for it. I don't think we're going to come better off. I think we're going to become more divided. I think what we're going to see coming out of this is more broken churches, more Christians hurt, more broken bodies that left in the wake of Christianity. I think Christianity has a trail of broken and destroyed lives because of the way we think and the way we handle things. There's got to be a biblical way to respond to these things. So I'm going to keep thinking this. I know I'm just thinking out loud and trying to process this, but there's got to be, Paul sees this. Hey, this weakened me. So I'm going to rejoice in this. This weakens me so that I'm weak. When I'm weak, I am strong. How? Because when you're weak fleshly, then you can be strong spiritually. These things need to be strengthening us spiritually. There's got to be a spiritual way of benefit that comes from this. Yeah. So, all right, I'll stop right there. There's so much more I want to say, but at least I got some of these thoughts out there, and we'll have to see where this all goes. You can email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. Share your thoughts. You can try to process these thoughts as well and see where you end up. But I'll stop right there for today. I think I'm going to go home and get some food. And I'll be back here. The goal is tomorrow we're going to be live streaming. Only no in-person service tomorrow. We're going to take a 1 week break from that, and we'll see where we are the next week. A lot of different reasons for that. So here's what I challenge you to do, or just not really challenge you to do. I'll just give you a heads up. The goal is to be here tomorrow around 8 a.m. and then do live broadcasting till at least noon. Go home, come back. I'll try to be back here by 2 or 3 and do live broadcasting in the afternoon. I don't know for how long. And we'll see what we can produce tomorrow. Hopefully that will be beneficial to you. If there's a subject you want me to cover, if there's anything that you want me to talk about, email me at newsif@yahoo.com, and I'll see if it can fit into whatever I do tomorrow. Because sometimes I don't know how things are going to go because things kind of take its own little path. And right now my thoughts are just really going, we got trials. How do we handle these biblically? And that's where my thinking is now, and maybe your thinking's in the same way, or maybe it's not. So let me know. All right, everyone have a great day. God bless.